Hey guys, MetalJesus here, and today I'm back with another video talking about computer games that you probably didn't know existed. In the previous video, I already talked about a bunch of games and got some great feedback on that video, so I'll put a link to that up in the corner. But for this one, I've got another stack of games. I think you guys are going to find this pretty interesting, and hopefully you'll learn something a little bit new. Some games here you haven't heard of before. Starting with a personal favorite of mine. I loved this game as a kid. It is Aliens, the computer game by Activision. Now, I know there's been several other Alien games over the years, or I guess decades at this point, but again, it's this Commodore 64 version here that I absolutely love. However, this also came out on the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad, and also the Apple II, so maybe you played it there, who knows? But on the Commodore 64, I thought this game just had its own really cool look and feel to it. I love the intro that they recreate from that scene in the movie where they're all sitting around and they're being smartasses and you're kind of getting to know the people that are going to be in this movie. It's a classic scene in the movie and they recreate it here. I love it. The game is divided into 6 stages covering various action scenes based on that James Cameron movie, and it starts with the landing on LV-426 with the APC going through an ion storm. And again, as a kid, I was like, wow, this is so cool. It's almost like a little bit of a space flight simulator, but you know, not really. But then once you get down to the planet, it turns into a side-scrolling shooter where you have to fend off waves of these aliens while your dude down there tries to slowly cut through the blast door. Oh, it's so nerve-wracking, but it's also really cool, very intense. And then it turns into a rescue mission where you're going through the med labs trying to look for survivors and so on. And then it ends with this cool battle with Ripley in the power loader, and she's taking on the alien queen. It's funny because going back and looking at this game now, yeah, the graphics are pretty blocky, but man, at the time, this was cool on the Commodore. I loved it. Moving on to another game that I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know about, and that is Adventures in Narnia. This was released back in 1984, and it's an arcade game that was originally released for the Apple and Commodore 64 computers. Now, this is kind of unusual because it mixes both digital gameplay and also real-world board game. So in the box you see here, you see that there is included dice as well as cards, and you use those while playing this game. And I'm sure most people are familiar with Narnia. It's based on a popular book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. As a matter of fact, the original version of this game included a copy of that book in here. I just don't have it anymore. And like I said, it's kind of an arcade game. So in the beginning here, the first level, you're in the wardrobe and then you are trying to collect flowers while trying to avoid bumping into the dwarves. Now, if you hit one of them, well, you're supposed to roll the physical dice to see if you beat the number that the game gave you for whatever you bumped into. It's almost kind of like D&D, where you're trying to roll to see who has the higher, the hit points or the higher roll to see if you actually survive or not. And you can totally cheat, right? So it's trusting you to actually do the dice roll and then be honest with the answer, but you can also just type in whatever number would be higher, and then you can continue playing the game. And then sometimes you'll be prompted to draw a card, which then asks you to press a certain key on the keyboard, which will then take you to a mini game. So very interesting how they wanted to bring the board game element into this digital version of Narnia. Now, I'll be honest, it's probably not the best game, but it's got some interesting ideas, and I bet you had never heard of this before. Super Contra, also known as Super C, you've probably heard of before, but did you know that actually back in 1990, Konami was trying to do this big push to bring some of their popular arcade games to the computer? And this version right here specifically is for MS-DOS, which again, a lot of people didn't even know existed. You play as either Bill or Lance, and you're trying to take on the Red Falcon organization, which is again threatening Earth. Now, what's interesting about this is that obviously the PC at the time Well, it had a lot of technical challenges compared to, say, the more popular arcade version, or a lot of people played this on the original NES, of course, but specifically, the graphics were pretty challenging to get working on MS-DOS, and so that's why they're a little bit simpler looking here. Specifically, the smooth scrolling is very difficult to do in DOS at that time. So again, that's why it looks different. But the other thing is that at the time, not a lot of people would have a controller, hooked to their computer. So a lot of these type of games were played with the keyboard. And this is one of those games that'll do that, and it's kind of challenging to do that. If you've never played an arcade game like this using specific keys, yeah, it's probably not the optimal way to play, but that's what you did back then. And so these days, the DOS version of Super Contra is kind of more of a curiosity compared to the other more popular versions. No one would ever say that it's actually superior in any way, but I still think it's pretty neat to see all these years later. Here's another one that's kind of odd. I'm going to be curious to know how many people remember this. It's Paul McCartney, Give My Regards to Broad Street. So this is the official game based on the movie of the same name, and this came out in 1985. I do remember as a kid being pretty excited to see the movie. I remember hearing about it, and that is until I actually watched it. Oh man, the movie is slow, it's kind of random, and frankly, it's just really forgettable. And this game right here is based on it, so set your expectations accordingly. So what's going on here? Well, it takes place right after the events of the movie, where a audio track, a song, is discovered to be missing from the master tapes, and so you need to track that down. So in this game, you play as Paul McCartney, and you're driving around London trying to track down the different band members who I guess are going to help you find the different pieces of the song, get it back just in time so you can release it, and everything will be great. The game takes place in London, and thankfully the game has a physical map that is included, because without it, it's really easy to get lost. It's not accurate to, real London in any way, and so that's kind of a little bit frustrating with this, despite the fact that the driving isn't really that great either, but it's just really easy to get lost. So yeah, you're gonna need that map. And controlling that Ford Prefect is so finicky, and it's really not much fun. And then you're cruising around trying to find these band members that are at train stations or at other places like that, and the cops are, hassling you. Yeah, it's kind of annoying. As you can hear from my voice, it's not a great game, but I am a sucker for games that are based on bands and musicians. And again, I think a lot of people kind of forgot that this even came out. Many of you will probably recognize this. However, I'll be curious to know if you know this version of A Nightmare on Elm Street. This one coming to the PC and the Commodore 64. I don't need to tell many of you, but a completely different version of this game came out on the original Nintendo. And that makes sense because this is a completely different version for the computers. This game actually was made by Westwood Associates, which eventually turned into Westwood Studios. Now, that probably sounds familiar because they made a bunch of classic D&D games, including Eye of the Beholder, but then they went on to make Dune 2, Command and Conquer, Blade Runner, Nox, and dozens more. First thing you're going to notice here is that while the NES version was more of a 2D platforming game, this is a top-down action adventure game. In the beginning of the game, you'll choose which of the Elm Street teenagers you want to play as, and you kind of want to look at this because each one of them has a special power that you can use in the game. And then you're in this intro level where you're being chased by Freddy down these neighborhood streets. And the goal here is to try to find his house and run into it as quickly as possible. This is pretty tricky actually because they all kind of look the same. You're not entirely sure which one is his. Well, you see it here. It's slightly more messed up than the others in the neighborhood. Once you go into his home, that's where the real game starts, because essentially your character now is almost in a game kind of like Gauntlet meets like an RPG, where it's top down and you're basically kind of exploring around, gathering stuff, weapons, and also things that'll heal you, as well as coins. And you're trying to find your friends, the other teenagers on the different floors. And I have to say, actually, this is kind of fun. And like I said, it's a mix of Gauntlet and an RPG. I found myself really enjoying this game quite a bit because you have different weapons, and plus you also need to, take caffeine to make sure that you don't suddenly fall asleep. Yeah, it's a pretty cool little game. So if you haven't played this version of it before, you might want to check it out. Here we have Star Trek, The Promethean Prophecy. So this was released on DOS, Commodore 64, Apple II, and Mac. And this was released back in 1986 by Simon & Schuster. So this is an all-original text adventure based on the classic Star Trek TV series. You play as Captain James T. Kirk with the rest of the Enterprise crew when the USS Enterprise is attacked by what appears to be a Romulan bird of prey. And so you set down on this mysterious planet after that because you need to try to find food so that your crew basically doesn't starve. In this game, you're going to interact with the Prometheans as well as explore it's kind of a secretive, kind of weird world that they have here. So, there's strange alien ruins, there's bizarre creatures, there's also like lost technology that you're going to interact with. As you might expect, not everything is as it seems on this planet, and so you quickly learn that you're actually being tested for some reason, and that the entire planet, as well as the Enterprise, are in danger. So this is kind of everything that you would want from a good Star Trek story. And, at the time when this came out, it was applauded for being really true to the characters in the show. And so I think it's worth checking out, especially if you like text adventures. Next up is an odd one. So this is Frankie Goes to Hollywood. This was released on the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum, and the Amstrad, and this was released in 1985 by Ocean. This is often considered one of the more creative and unusual video games of the 8-bit era. And again, it's based on the band Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Do you guys remember that? Relax, Two Tribes. They were massive for like a year in the mid 80s. And, here we are with a game, and this is a trip. What you're going to do here is perform 60 different tasks as you travel around Mundainesville through the Pleasure Dome. And the aim here is to evolve into a whole person. So basically you have to acquire these pleasure points. Now, to do this, you have to build up 4 qualities: sex, war, love, and faith, and get each of those to 100%. Did you get that? And so it's a mix of exploration as well as some mini games and some puzzle solving. Plus, there's also this bigger twist in this game because there's actually a murderer running around, and you need to try to figure out who that is. Now, I didn't play this as a kid, but I heard about it. I think it won awards or something like that. I mean, a lot of people fondly look back at this and really appreciated how it tried to do something different, right? It was mixing adventure games, arcade action, and also social satire. And I have to say, going back and playing it today to capture some of this footage, I was enjoying it. Yes, there are definitely some kind of weirdness with the controls a bit. They take a little bit to get used to, but yeah, it's actually a pretty cool game. Next up is Fahrenheit 451. So this was released in 1984, and I'm sure many of you are going to recognize the name. It's based on a classic science fiction novel by Ray Bradbury. But what's cool about this is actually functions almost as a sequel, because this actually takes place 5 years after the events of the original. Now, if you're not familiar with this, well, the story is you play as a firefighter, which in the future, that's a person who burns banned books. So basically the government has control over all media, and they have a lot of books that they just do not allow you to have. It's a crime, and firefighters go around and destroy them. However, in the original story, you actually join a rebellion and work to basically, try to reverse that a little bit. And so in this game, you actually return to the city where you once worked. And the goal of this is to find 34 fragments of banned books that were once part of the New York Public Library. And then you help the resistance try to piece together those lost stories. You'll also have to avoid threats that are trying to stop you, as well as solve puzzles and unlock secrets. And, you guys are looking at the footage here, and yeah, the graphics of this text adventure, they're pretty simple, but, I appreciate that they at least tried. So many text adventures of the day didn't have graphics because that was just more disk space and it'd be slow to load. But I do feel like in this one, they're effective. They give you an idea about what you're reading about. So I appreciated that. And I loved the original novel, but it's definitely some heavy stuff. They cover some big topics like the importance of preserving memory, as well as just general hope and oppression in this society. And then there's also, self-worth and having an identity in this sort of dystopia. It's pretty brutal. I guess Ray Bradbury was actively involved in the making of this game, which makes it feel even more like a truly interactive sequel to that beloved novel. So, yeah, again, if you're like me, you like the original story, you might want to check this out. Here is the Jetsons, George Jetson and the Legend of Robotopia for the Amiga. I'll be honest, I've had a copy of this game in my collection, but I have never played it until now. And I was surprised at the high quality of this point-and-click adventure game, based on a popular cartoon from the 1960s. I do remember watching the cartoon as a kid, along with Scooby-Doo and also the Flintstones. And you guys see the graphics here. I mean, they look like they're lovingly designed to fit right in that TV show. You can tell that they took great inspiration from that. But I didn't grow up with the Amiga computer. I was a Commodore 64 kid. And so every time I look at these games designed for the Amiga, I'm always blown away by how great the graphics look and how nice the animation is. I mean, it really shows off the power of the Amiga. And so it's fun to kind of jump into these type of games. Another cool thing about this game is that it includes this cool comic book manual in the box, which basically leads into and sets up the events of the game. And the story is fun too. So George Jetson wakes up late again for work, and when he gets into work, Mr. Spacely is upset, and so for George's punishment, he has to go to the planet Robotopia and find out why the robots are all hostile and kind of what's going on with the rogue AI overlord there. And it's got all the characters from the show, plus it also has that kind of 1960s technology look to it that's very unique to that show. I love the graphical interface. It almost feels like advanced for its time, especially compared to some of the other games that we've shown. So yeah, this is a cool game. So if you have an Amiga and you like point and click adventure games, I highly recommend this. And so that, guys, is another stack of computer games that you probably didn't know existed. I'm thinking most of you probably have never seen these particular ones on computers before. I could be wrong. Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, I've got a ton of games that I could do. I could keep doing this forever. And it's fun, right? You don't see a lot of this stuff on YouTube. So if you like this type of stuff, click the like button, maybe share it on social media. Let me know what you think. As always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.